Hey, what is up everybody, it's ℂ𝕂𝔼𝔻 here for Anime Uproar, and just as Deku's final quirk was revealed and he looked like he was about to defeat the final villain, the MHA manga suddenly got a lot darker as the tragic and brutal truth about the hero society was revealed. I did not think that Boku no Hero would ever get this dark or talk about such uncomfortable topics. But here we are. Beneath the surface of the glitzy and glamorous world of heroes, a horrible truth has been hiding all along, but now in the final arc, it's all finally bubbling up to the surface. This is huge for the world of MHA, so let's get into it. You guys know how this works, leave a quick like and comment right now to help out with that YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, do me a quick favor and make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. If you don't go through the steps of subscribing, hitting the bell, and then selecting the option that says all, you're still gonna miss a ton of our videos even if you are subscribed. It's just how YouTube works. Finally, this video will contain Boku no Hero manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. At the very end of the previous chapter, the action switched from the epic struggle between Deku and Shigaraki/All-For-One to another location. And in this other location, a gigantified spinner was leading an army of mutant quirk users in a ruthless assault on the heroes. The goal of Spinner and his army is to liberate Kurogiri from police captivity, and they are presumably planning to use Kurogiri's quirk to teleport reinforcements up to the UA in order to help Shigaraki/All-For-One, or they're planning to teleport Shigaraki/All-For-One away from the UA to liberate him from that erasing quirk. While we all know that All-For-One still has tricks up his sleeve, judging by the last two chapters, Deku clearly has the upper hand, and so Shigaraki/All-For-One may need backup as soon as possible in order to survive. I never thought I'd say this, but the outcome of the most important battle in MHA may actually depend on Spinner. Oh, and we can't forget that mutant-type quirks are not affected by erasure, so that is something that we need to think about for the future. The latest chapter begins with some serious world building. We see a flashback that emphasizes once more that people with mutant-type quirks that make their appearance drastically different from that of a typical human have faced a lot of discrimination in the past. And even though it may appear on the surface that the world has progressed to a point where people with mutant quirks are being treated equally, there are still those who believe that people with mutant-type quirks have tainted blood and that they must be forced out of human society by any means necessary. We are then taken back to the time that Dabi's defeat was prematurely announced to everyone on all the battlefields. The chapter narration confirms that Kurogiri is considered to be the high-end Nomu closest to perfection. And so All-For-One had instructed Spinner and his army of supporters to attack a hospital where he believes that Kurogiri is being kept in order to break him out of there. Now, this confirmation that Kurogiri is the most advanced high-end Nomu happens very quickly, and the chapter just moves on from that statement. But we can't underestimate just how important this one piece of information is. Ever since we first learned Kurogiri's secret identity back in like chapter 253, one thing has always been bothering me. If Kurogiri was a Nomu who was created decades ago by All-For-One and Ujiko, then why was he so much more intelligent and so much more advanced than the latest high-end Nomu? Wouldn't the procedure for creating a Nomu only get more advanced over the course of so many years? And yet, even though Kurogiri was created over a decade ago, he seems to be far more advanced than even the most advanced high-ends that we see now. I've always speculated that Kurogiri is so advanced because he wasn't created from a corpse like the other Nomu. I believe that Oboro Shirakumo was still alive when All-For-One and Ujiko stole his body, although just barely. After all, Ujiko was a doctor at the time and he was using the hospital morgue as his private playground. So he could have easily made it seem like Oboro died when he really hadn't. And so for almost 3 years now, I've been saying that Oboro is still alive inside of Kurogiri and that he will be able to return eventually because he never really died. His personality was simply overwritten by Kurogiri's personality, and I think that this process is reversible. This latest confirmation that Kurogiri is the most advanced despite being the oldest high-end may be hinting that my theory is correct. And the fact that Oboro is still alive will likely be revealed soon, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, back to the story. Spinner and the villains who have been dispatched on the mission to rescue Kurogiri are also joined by literally thousands of civilians. These are just regular people with mutant-type quirks who are sick of discrimination and who chose to fight on the side of Spinner. In fact, Spinner is leading an army of roughly 15,000 people with mutant-type quirks, which is just a massive amount of individuals, especially since they are all armed with quirks. There are only about 200 heroes and police officers standing in the way of this huge army, although to be fair, most of the members of this so-called army are just regular people, not trained fighters. So a single hero is able to take out a lot of them, as Present Mike demonstrates when he uses his quirk to attack a bunch of them at once. But before Present Mike can make a decisive move, multiple villains band together and launch a coordinated attack against him. He finds himself in serious danger, but he is saved at the last moment by Koji Koda, who uses his quirk to command a bunch of birds to carry Present Mike out of harm's way. The heroes and cops are doing their best to hold off the huge mass of people trying to break into the hospital, but they are greatly outnumbered and they are clearly struggling. Even though most of these villains are just civilians who don't have fighting experience, what's making it harder to fight them is their fanatical devotion to Spinner and his cause. Now, assuming that they are not being controlled by some sort of quirk, the reason why they are so fanatically committed to Spinner is because they truly believe that he is the only one representing them and fighting for them against a society that has mistreated them for generations. The people with mutant-type quirks have gone through struggles that individuals who look human simply cannot understand. As we all know, in this world, 20% of the population is quirkless, so they just look completely human. Out of the 80% who have quirks, the majority have emitter and transformation type quirks that either maintain their human appearance and just give them cool powers, or that may alter their appearance through transformation, but only temporarily. And so, the minority of people who have mutant-type quirks and whose appearance is permanently different from that of the average human have faced a ton of discrimination and even outright pogroms and massacres. One of the villain leaders from the Paranormal Liberation Front jumps up on a platform and tells all the mutant quirk users to let their rage consume them and to hit back against this cruel and unjust society. We then get a quick history lesson in which we learn that ever since quirks first appeared, the individuals with mutant-type quirks that made them look different from everyone else were targeted for persecution. Not only were they discriminated against, but they were even outright attacked and killed. And sometimes large numbers of innocent people were massacred all at once. When the people doing these terrible things were asked why they did them, they would just say things like, "They were gross." These attackers simply did not see mutant-type quirk users as real human beings, and just because they looked different, they attacked them. Now, in the modern world, the Hero Society wants people to believe that equality has been achieved and that there are people with mutant-type quirks in position of power and influence. So, for example, we have high-ranking members of the police force who may look like a dog or a cat. We have Mezo as the principal of UA, and so on. Although I'm not even sure why Mezo was included here, because he's not really a human with a mutant-type quirk, he's actually an animal with a high intelligence quirk. Anyway, according to this villain leader, while the situation for those with mutant-type quirks may seem better now in big cities where people are used to being around a ton of diversity, as soon as you get out of the cities and into the country, the same prejudices against mutant-type quirk users still exist. And all the innocent people there are still facing horrible discrimination. All of these heroes with mutant-type quirks like Koda and Shoji are just city slickers who have no idea what kind of hardships they would have faced if they were in the countryside. To the villains, these heroes are traitors to their own kind, and for the villains, there is no more room for negotiation or concessions. It is now time for the oppressed to join Spinner and fight back against this society and its lies. Spinner is their hero. He will lead them to true freedom. Meanwhile, Spinner has no idea what these guys are even talking about. Ever since All For One gave him that gigantification quirk, his mind has been going blank and he hasn't really been himself. The only clear thought in his head is the command he received to rescue Kurogiri. And this really reminds me of ℂ𝕂𝔼𝔻. I wonder if All For One is trying to turn Spinner into another Machia. a completely subservient and obedient machine of destruction? If so, then how ironic is it that All For One has convinced Spinner that his mission is to liberate those who were oppressed for being different? Meanwhile, All For One is out there just trying to enslave him. And speaking of All For One's true intentions, I didn't notice this when I first read the chapter, but fellow YouTuber Zonin pointed out in one of his videos that one of the people shown massacring the mutant-type Quirk users looks a lot like a younger All For One, at least from behind. We can't see his face, so we don't know for sure, but if All For One really was one of the people who actually instigated the attacks on those with mutant-type quirks, then him now pretending to care about them and to want to liberate them makes him even more diabolical than I imagined him to be. That would just be so evil, wow. As the huge and overpowered but mentally disjointed Spinner continues his mission to find Kurogiri, he is suddenly attacked by Mezo Shoji and his Octo Blow. The other villains call Shoji a traitor and attack him, but Shoji asks them, "What does attacking a hospital have to do with your cause?" Back when the heroes invaded the hospital at Deku, they at least evacuated everyone first. But have these guys even thought of doing that? Are they really willing to kill a bunch of innocent people in the name of their cause? A cause they claim is just and righteous? And it is at this moment that we realize that the flashback from the beginning of the chapter was actually about Shoji. I mean, maybe you realized it right away because of the hair, but personally, I did not. Shoji wasn't some insulated city kid who never faced hardships. Just the opposite. He was pelted with rocks and beaten and screamed at because his blood was allegedly tainted and inferior to the blood of other humans. And as he recalls these tragic memories, Shoji is able to summon more strength, and he then manages to break away from the villains who had been holding him down. During the struggle, his face mask falls off, and his real face is finally revealed. We also see that he has multiple scars on his face, probably as a direct result of all the oppression and abuse that he had faced as a child. And yet, Shoji isn't angry about the abuse that he suffered. He is angry that these villains who claim to speak for him and who claim to represent people like him are out here preparing to storm a hospital and harm countless innocent people for their so-called cause. Shoji proclaims that if they intend to attack this hospital without even evacuating the people inside it, he will never forgive them, and that is how this chapter ends. Even though this chapter took us away from the main battles and the main characters, I actually thought that it was a great chapter. It gave us some serious world building, and even though some of this stuff was definitely hinted at before, I actually wish that it had been explored more by this point in the story. This is clearly very important stuff that still has serious consequences in the world of MHA. And this type of discrimination against people who just happen to look different is clearly a direct parallel to racism in our own world. There is a powerful message here, and Shoji's experience as someone who faced oppression and then still decided to become a hero is extremely interesting. I honestly wish that we got to see more of this and learn more about him earlier on, because it's great stuff. Shoji is usually one of the characters you don't really think too much about in Class 1A, and yet in reality he is so interesting. Oh, and I know that Horikoshi loves his Star Wars references, but I don't think that he needed to break our immersion during such a serious chapter by directly referencing Order 66 from Star Wars. It kind of put me off, to be honest, not sure if anyone else felt this way. But despite the clearly questionable Star Wars references, this chapter emphasized that MHA has gotten a lot darker over the past few years. And the story is now dealing with some very serious issues, including racism, oppression, pogroms, and even massacres. For a world like the Hero Society to feel real and lived in, it needs to deal with such serious issues, and I am all for it. But still, this is definitely a very different tone from the one that we had at the beginning of the story. Things have gotten a lot darker, and there are very serious issues at stake here. We have to ask ourselves who are the real heroes and who are the real villains. We have to ask ourselves how society is supposed to deal with things like racism and oppression. And we have to face the fact that some people are willing to commit horrible atrocities against others for the stupidest and most pointless reasons. The heroes are responsible for protecting everyone, not just the majority or those who look like the majority of people. And this is by no means an easy task. especially not in places that are hidden away and far from the glamorous spotlight of the hero society. Deku has always been such an optimist and such an idealist, but it looks like Horikoshi is about to force Deku to face some serious and dark stuff. And all of this could end up playing an important part in the final battle. I, for one, fully support this because it is important for Deku's character to face the dark side of the hero society and the uncomfortable truths hidden behind the surface. And of course, I look forward to his character changing and growing as a result of all of this. Did you guys like this chapter as much as I did, despite the fact that it took us away from the main battles? Do you think that Spinner will succeed in liberating Kurogiri, and will that lead Shigaraki/All For One to break free from Monoma's erasure? Will my theory about Oboro still being alive inside Kurogiri turn out to be true? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this MHA video and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment. It really helps me out a lot. And if you guys haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, remember that subscribing is completely free and it is a very real way of directly supporting the channel. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at @AnimeUproar. Big thank you to all of our Anime Uproar patrons for making videos like this one possible. Special thank you to Trucker Tim, a disciple of Lord Twigo himself. And I can't forget all of our The One tier patrons, including Alpha Sigma, Pate Heffa, The Toasted Chi, Corey McGowan, Owen, Taylor, and Anime S Code M. Finally, thank you to all of our other patrons, including Pro Hero tier patrons, the one and only Gilgamesh, Angel Cruz, Alicia Octor, Fatboy Games, Kaido Might Be a Duck, Alivania, Sandy, and the School Bus. If you enjoy our videos and you feel that they provide value to you, consider supporting us on Patreon or by becoming a channel member. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.